Hello, everyone. It is so good to have so many of you here today with us. I'm happy you managed to take some time from your day to attend to this activity on knowledge to take control of your mind, which is the first lecture of our series on fundamental human qualities to prosper in the workplace. These might be questions that we ask ourselves from time to time, especially during this period in which we're living many challenges and having to learn to balance work and other priorities. Let me start by introducing myself. I'm Maria Kraus. I'm an immunologist and a consultant, and I'm also a student of logosophy. Since this might be the first contact with the Logosophical Foundation for some of you here, I will briefly explain what the institution is. The Logosophical Foundation is a school of human self-betterment. So Logosophy was created by the thinker and humanist Carlos Bernardo Pacocci in 1930. And today there are centers and students in many parts of the world, huge concentrations in Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay, but also extending to Europe, Israel, and Australia. In North America, there are students spread throughout US and Canada with a Logosophical Center in Miami, Florida. One of the aims of Logosophy is to offer resources for improvement of oneself. And for this, Logosophy has a method which encourages not to believe in what the author brings, but rather it suggests that each one apply the knowledge in their own lives in order to experience what is studied and also study what is experienced. For me, Logosophy has changed the way I deal with problems and improved a lot my time management. I started studying Logosophy when I was doing my PhD in England, and I would often perceive my challenges and difficulties as being bigger and more difficult than they actually were. So that has helped me a lot. And I learned how to control my thoughts, to then see things from a different perspective, and to face challenges with determination and seeing them as perhaps opportunities for growth. And this year is 90 years since the Logosophical Foundation was established, and there have been many activities organized around the world in commemoration of that. This activity is a part of a special 4-lecture series, as I said, and we have speakers Fernando and Renata here today with us. To make the most of this activity, you can have something on hand to write down what caught your attention or the reflections that arise. And before we get started with the activity, I want to quickly remind everyone to stay tuned until the end. We will share information of upcoming activities, free courses, books, and more. And today, our invited speakers are Renata and Fernando. Fernando works for a big corporation in the area of electrical systems, where he leads a global team. Renata has worked for 12 years in aircraft maintenance, and she currently works with IT. Once again, a very warm welcome to each of you listening today. And thank you so much, Fernando and Renata, for accepting our invitation. And I will now pass the word to Fernando.
Thank you for the initial words, Maria. Really appreciate. And I would like also to thank you for the opportunity of being here with Renata, sharing some of our reflections and experiences related to a very important topic for our lives. That is reality of the mind and the thoughts. So in my professional life, as Maria was bringing close to 20 years, I can relate to so many situations where knowing the reality of the thoughts and the control of the mind have played a critical role on my actions and results. And I'm very happy to bring some of those reflections and experiences with you today. So I would like to start bringing a reflection. And I ask you to also reflect with yourself and try to understand if that happens with you as well. Most of the time in our lives, when we are making decisions, consciously or unconsciously, it is based on what I have in my mind at that moment. Being more specific with the thoughts I have at the time. Have you noticed that? I will bring a simple experience that connects with this element of reflection. So I normally will start working very early in the morning because of my job. I have calls with Europe and India, and that requires me to be early to work for those calls. And because of that, I have an agreement with my wife that she takes the kids to school. And that works very well. But on one of those days, I didn't have one of those meetings, but I end up waking up early again in the normal hours. And I was preparing myself, and one thought came. Okay, Fernando, that's a nice opportunity to catch up with work that you have behind. Take this hour that you don't have a meeting and work. And I was preparing myself, and then a few minutes after, another thought came. Fernando, why you don't take your kid to school today instead of your wife? It's an opportunity to engage with him. It's an opportunity to start the day in a different spin for you and him. And also you can help your wife to rest a little bit more. That was a very simple but interesting experience because at that moment I could see in my mind two thoughts kind of fighting for my priority, right? One pushing me to work and one pushing me to take my son to school. And I was then able consciously to look to those and make the right selection. I was very happy at that moment where I was able to select to go with my son to school, and I was able to come back and take care of the other things normally. So I bring that experience with a reflection, an additional reflection. Have you been on those moments of a decision, of maybe taking an action, and you have that kind of little war happening with your mind and thoughts? Try to remember some of those. With that experience in mind, I would like to start our conversation bringing another reflection. Take that also to your inner self and analyze if that makes sense to you. At the same time that there is a physical reality that I can see, I can touch, and I can hear, there is also another one, maybe even more real than the physical, that happens within myself, more specifically with my mind and my thoughts. And as a matter of fact, today I comprehend that is probably the most important reality in terms of how I feel, how I see things around me, and how I act. So coming back to that simple experience with my son, the physical result of not going to office at that time, taking the car keys and taking him to school, today I comprehend, was a projection of a decision that was already made few minutes earlier on another reality, my mental reality. I can take that reflection even further and say that the physical reality, the way I see, the way I hear, and the way I act, it is a consequence of the mental reality that happens within myself. What happens within is the cause, what happens outside is a projection, is the consequence. Does that make sense? Let's think about that as we continue our conversation. Sometimes a simple change of a concept or of a thought in my mind can make my day very different. And I believe everybody has lived something related to that. So some weeks back, I was having a conversation at my workplace. And I was coming from a 1 week vacation. And during that period, I took a time to analyze my inner reality. I'm calling that internal check and adjust. Some people may know this term, check and adjust. Normally we use that to look things around us, look what's going on, check and adjust. But I'm starting to use the word internal in front of that check and adjust, internal check and adjust. That has the objective to look to myself and see how I was approaching the different situations around me, how I was processing, how I was perceiving things to prepare me to react in the better manner. So I ask you, have you sometimes do that exercise of internal check and adjust, look at your own thoughts, how you are approaching the situations. It's a very good exercise. And then I was at that time with a lot of things going on at work. Some things I could call concerning, some issues to solve. And I would normally call those situations problems or issues. Normally we call this way for situations that are concerning. And that was really draining my energy at that time. So do you know those situations that where, for example, seems that you need to solve something and that drain all your mental energy? And you feel very tired after some time? Well, I was on that with some of those, and I had to work on those. And most of us would normally call those situations problems. However, doing that check and adjust, I changed the way I was calling those. I started to call them just situations, only situations. And what is the difference of calling it a problem or as a situation? The following concept came to me at that reflection. What makes some people see those situations as big or small problems, but maybe some people doesn't see even as problems, they see as learning opportunities or challenges? Then I start to comprehend that it's not really the situation per se, but at the end, how my mind and my thoughts perceive it. The physical reality, the things that were ongoing, would most likely not change. But the way I live the reality, the way I process, and the way I act may change completely depending how I'm preparing my inner self. So have you been in that situation, for example, where you were anxious to do something, impatient, with some impulse, you want to get things done quickly, and then you take that deep breath, you serene your thoughts, and that change how you'd respond to something? Everybody has probably lived something similar one way or another. This experience connects with another element of reflection that I'd like us to think about. Now I'm going to use the word problems. All problems happens in the mind. It is the mind that generates the problem, make things difficult, generating the obstacles to our lives. Does that make sense? All problems happens in the mind. Well, another experience with my son, very recent this one. I was noticing doing this analysis that on certain situations, when I was impatient, unhappy with something, or concerned about something that was going on, and there were some situations where my son did something a little bit different outside my expectation. I saw myself doing several times, saw me overreacting with him, being too harsh on him. And then later coming with a thought of regret. Have you lived those situations where sometimes you are not happy with something, you end up saying something to someone else, and you regret later? That was an example. But it was interesting that I also noticed that in some of those same situations, but I was very happy, I was serene, things were working well. My son had the same reaction, but I didn't have the same reaction. As a matter of fact, I didn't even bother about the situation that was happening with him there. So the following question came to myself. If those situations, in this case, my son's actions, were the same, why two very different reactions on my end? Where really the problem is? So wouldn't it be nice if you'd be able to remove all thoughts of fear, concern, when dealing with a situation? Or to control an impulse of saying something to someone and then you just, as I was mentioning before, a few minutes maybe you regret. Or to overcome a sensation of lack of confidence on yourselves in front of a situation that's challenging. Would not be nice to overcome those? Or maybe to be more patient and tolerant with one another? why sometimes we can do that, some of that, and sometimes we cannot. But how I do that? How do I take control over my mind and my thoughts? So another complementary concept we have learned with logosophy is around the nature of the thoughts. And I consider this concept very original and very useful to my daily life. Thoughts are living entities that can move from one mind to another. Living entities that can move from one mind to another. Sometimes that happens under our control. Sometimes it can happen without our control. And what I have been observing is that when it happens without our control, out of our control, is where normally the unpleasant and undesired situations and regretful actions happens to ourselves. So have you been in a situation, for example, where you were in a good mood? You wake up, it's a sunny day, happy, things working well, and then you come in contact with someone on a bad day. And then when you see yourself later, you change your mood as well. Or another one that probably everybody lives. If you drive, okay? You wake up in the morning, everything okay, you get into the car, and as you enter to go to any place, you enter in a traffic jam, or someone just block your highway, block your way, and you start to get some thoughts of impatience, sometimes intolerance, and you change your mental environment very quickly. Why that happens? Looking now from the good side, talking about the good thoughts now. Those situations where you are very happy, with very good thoughts, for example, joy, feeling capable, with very good thoughts of feeling confident, and so. And then you see an adverse situation, and that does not affect you at all. You are so happy, so grateful, that doesn't bother you. Like my previous example with my son when I was happy. So in this last example, in these examples of those good thoughts, the state of mind, those good thoughts, are like a shield that kinds of protect you from that adverse reality. We learn that this shield, in the form of mental defenses, can be consciously built in our mind, and we can use those to protect us from those extraneous and this external environment, the adverse reality, helping our process of thinking, reasoning from those undesirable thoughts. One more experience related to the control of the thoughts that I think illustrates the importance of these concepts. I see myself as an anxious person. And I know that the ones that know me for a long time know that I was probably much worse in terms of anxiety and getting better. And that's been a conscious effort, but I'm still considering myself a lot of opportunities in this space. And I have also the tendency of wanting things on my way and struggling when I'm not in control of what is happening with me. So several times I've seen myself concerned, worried about something, a result of a project, what is going to happen, and internally starting to live situations that were not really based on fact, on data, building a chaos in my mind with thoughts of uncertainty, fear, impatience, and many others. There was a situation that I was on my bed, projecting with my imagination a series of events that would occur if the result of a certain project, a very important project, would go wrong. I call that the kind of imaginary what ifs. I don't know if you already did that with yourself. What if this happened? And then what if that other thing happened? And then what if this? And we start to build that, what I call a castle of cards of imaginary events that were really draining my energy. And that would not help me to deal with the situation I had to deal at work. And this is, for example, some types of the useless thoughts that I started to show up in my mind at that time. Okay, Fernando, this is going to fail. Then you need to have a certain meeting with the leadership. Then you do not work. and then there will be another problem, and so and so and so. It was very interesting when that was happening because I was consciously looking to what was happening in my mind and knowing the importance of having a serene mind to think and analyze things. I was able to stop that mental disorder, look at those thoughts, and start to use my reasoning and making questions to myself. And today, those questions I use in a lot of moments in my life, in a lot of similar situations. Those questions I'm going to bring now are like mental defenses to myself. The first question that came to myself, Fernando, all those thoughts of fear, concerning, lack of confidence, and many other things would change by any means all the result of the experiment that was ongoing in that project. The answer in my mind was very clear and direct. No, not at all. And the second question then, okay, so why are you suffering that much if all this suffering is not going to change the outcome of the event? This reflection was so powerful that most of those useless thoughts disappeared kind of right away. And I could feel a mental serenity. And now, with my mind under control, I was able to patiently plan my next move with the proper actions in mind. Until I was not able to look to those thoughts, face them directly, use that conscious mental effort to remove the useless ones and regain control of my mind, I was, as a matter of fact, under the control of those useless thoughts. And that should be the other way around. I must be the owner of my mind and take control on what thoughts I want to use it. Another knowledge and learning that was helpful on this experience was the process of identification and classification of the thoughts that were present at the moment. Look into those thoughts and start to classify the ones that are going to be useful to solve the situations and to help you in that moment, and the ones that are not helping at all, the useless ones. What I see happening a lot in moments of decision, moments of situations to be addressed, any moment in life, at work, is that when those moments come, there is a lot of confounding in the mind, in between the thoughts that are the useful ones, supported by the reality, by the facts, by the good thoughts, in the useful ones, and the other thoughts that are the useless, that make confusion, that doesn't help me to think wisely and think with a serene mind. I need to do an exercise at those moments and classify, identify, and start to remove the ones I don't want to use at that moment. But now, I will give the word to Renata, that will bring us some additional elements and experiences also related to the same reality.
Thank you, Fernando. Hello, everyone. I am happy to be here today. And yes, I also experienced this little war in my mind, and I guess everybody does, and not only at work, but in all areas of our lives. What I have been learning with logosophy is to practice thinking with serenity, and most importantly, learn how to do it consciously, as you already mentioned. When I was waiting for my visa to come to Canada, I decided to get a job in retail because I knew I wouldn't be able to work in my field upon my arrival. So I got a job in a bookstore. My plan was to seek an entry-level position, and instead, they offered me a management role. However, I didn't know anything about that market. So I decided to use the first 3 months to observe the dynamic of the store and to reflect on the skills that I had and the ones I would have to acquire to perform that job. The manager who was training me had a completely different way of thinking. She wanted me to be working as a salesperson for my training. So in a meeting with the general manager, she said in a very irritable voice that I didn't want to work. I'm sure you can imagine how I felt at that moment. I wanted to jump right in and defend myself. But instead of acting on those thoughts, I took a deep breath and chose not to address her inappropriate behavior right away. Earlier, Fernando was talking about being anxious and impulsive facing a situation. What if instead of taking that deep breath and controlling my thoughts at that moment, I had impulsively answered that person? Have you had situations like that in your life? Maybe not at work, but with your family or friends? Once I read in a logosophical book, it's necessary, therefore, to constantly cultivate one's reflection, avoiding hasty opinions, since it will never be too late to answer with the word or the example. So after that meeting, I took some time to figure out where she was coming from, what she could see that I couldn't. After all, she was doing that for 20 years. Certainly, I had a lot to learn with her. So I adjusted my plans and worked accordingly. A few months later, she visited me at the branch that I was hired to manage, and she paid me a compliment for the work I had accomplished. I have seen very often in workplace, in my family, and of course in myself, situations when I made decisions based on an impulse and then regret it just a few minutes later, or in a moment of impatience, made an action that did not have the outcome I was looking for. Why does that happen? Fernando, what are your thoughts about that?
Thanks for those reflections, Renata, and trying to bring some of my perspective on those. What I notice and I today comprehend is that when I try to think, make a decision, work with someone that's different than me, and that happens a lot, right? I may be surrounded by a certain class of bad thoughts, which Logosophy named some of them as mental deficiencies, as, for example, impatience, anxiety, propensity to desperation, intolerance, disrespect, and so many others. What I observe is that under those circumstances, when those thoughts are in control of my mind, I may be in a situation where the result of my mental process may not be what I would expect. When I try to think, to reason, try to understand things, those are highly influenced by the thoughts I have in my mind at that very moment. And that sometimes does not bring the proper results if I don't have the right thoughts with me. And why does that happen and happen so often with us? Today, I comprehend that in those moments, although it seems I'm the one taking the wrong actions, as a matter of fact, I've been under the control by a certain class of thoughts that was clouding my proper reasoning process and induced me to act against my will. Remember that concept I was bringing at the beginning about thoughts as being a live entity. I used to see myself in those situations very often, but I've seen that with a conscious effort, I'm trying to reduce the frequency of those situations in my life. Another teaching from Logosophy that helps me a lot in different situations in life and work when I'm dealing with others is that I need to separate the man from his thoughts. Sometimes the action of someone to you is not really what that person is, but what the thoughts that were with that person at that moment controlling him to do. So currently, today, when I see someone acting in a way that internally generates adverse reactions in myself, one of my efforts is to use mental empathy. Try to understand what thoughts could be inducing that person to act in that way. This mental exercise is another example of a mental defense. because it helps me to control my mental fire and reaction when I face something that I do not agree with. And I can say to, I mean, everybody probably has experiences. There are a lot of situations in our lives where we will face things we don't agree. This helps, right, to handle some of those situations. So starting to see my thoughts, understand how they work in my mind, and then start to take conscious actions to remove the useless ones that cloud my understanding, my free thinking, my reasoning, are one of the big endeavors that we as Logosophy students engage in order to take control of the mind and, by consequence, life. So we needed to select the proper thoughts we'd like to use at every moment, having the mind free and serene to then think well, reason, and take the right actions. So the author of Logosophy teaches that it is necessary not only to think, but also to think well on a solid basis in order to discern situations with certainty and serenity and know which is the best path to take. The key here for me, it's not just to think, I'm thinking I'm fine. No, I need to think well, think wisely. And that requires a mind to be serene. I'm on the full control of it and with all the thoughts I need to help me. So with that teaching in mind, I'd like to bring my last experience that indicates how the understanding of this reality of the thoughts can help me to take control over situations. So I had an important conversation with someone at my organization about an important decision we had to take. And I was preparing myself for that conversation. That's another technique. Start to select the thoughts that I'd like to use for that thought of resolution, of patience, respect, tolerance. I was selecting the ones I would like to use. And ended up that the meeting was set and I got a call very later in the day. It was evening already. And I could observe on the other person that he was already very tired and other thoughts coming like impatience, let's get things done quickly, let's solve it quickly, let's rush, some impatience and tolerance. I start to see some of those thoughts even coming to me, even though I was preparing myself. I was starting to have some of those penetrating my mental defenses. So I was conscious about that. I was looking that with those thoughts in mind would not help us to get a good agreement and convergence on what we had to do. So what I did, a simple move, I decided to decline the meeting and asked him to move to a later moment. I've been learning that we cannot think at moments of mental disorder, stress, sadness. It's not the right moment to think and to take decisions. And that understanding has helped me to direct my actions and end up meeting in a week after with much better results. Renata, have you noticed that as well? And what do you do when you observe that mental chaos in yourself?
Yes, I've noticed that as well. It's very hard to think properly and make good decisions when the mind is in a state of chaos, isn't it? Remember the bookstore I was telling you about? So a year later, they sent a young manager who had problems in another branch to work with us. Everything was fine until one day the HR showed up at the store saying that they would do an audit among the staff. The young manager had claimed that she was managing the store all by herself. The HR people arrived when my shift was finishing and I was leaving for my days off. And I saw that young manager talking to each person that was called to the audit. You probably can have an idea how my mind was at that moment. I'm laughing now, but I was really upset. I didn't see that coming at all. And it didn't make sense to me what they were doing and the way that they were doing it. The young manager was very friendly, so I was surprised that she could convince an entire department to do something like this behind my back. So I took another deep breath and decided to deal with the problem when I was back from my days off. When I come back to work, the result of the audit wasn't a surprise to me. The HR offered me to move to another department in the same company. Many thoughts were crossing my mind at that moment. Thoughts like, it was a bad idea to change my field completely. I don't have what it takes to manage the store. They might be right. I'm doing all things wrong. It was like a mental fire. As mentioned earlier, it's important to have a serene mind in order to think well. And that is exactly what I did. I asked what my options were and requested some time to think about it. After a week of reflection and analysis of the situation, I made my decision. I called the HR and asked them to do another audit in 1 month. If the result remained the same, I would quit the job. I didn't want to be a problem for the company, and they accepted my offer. In that month, I was actively patient, waiting for the next audit. I was aware of all the movements the young manager had done previously, so I strategically worked to neutralize the damages she was creating. The day of the second audit arrived, and I didn't want to play by her rules. So I made sure nothing was hidden and that the audit was done when both of us were present. The result of the second audit were in my favor, and it couldn't be different. This time, the staff went through the audit free of harassment. The main point is, if I didn't have these cognitions, the outcome of this story would be very different. And guess what? This knowledge is useful for all areas of my life, not just for the workplace. Let me share a story with you, my last story that happened with my daughter and I, to illustrate that. Once I took my daughter and 2 friends, a brother and a sister, to spend the day at Energyplex close to my house. Energyplex is an entertaining center with lots of activities, including rock wall and arcade. The arcade games work with money. So as you play, you collect tokens to exchange for prizes. My daughter doesn't really enjoy the arcade, so I never give her money to play there. So suddenly, the kids came to my table where I was with some tokens saying that they found them on the floor. I found it odd, but possible. After all, they had only 5 tokens and there was no prize worth it 5 tokens. However, they come back later with more tokens and prizes. It was a very delicate situation. I didn't let my daughter keep the stolen prizes. For some reason, the other kids kept the prizes. My daughter was really upset. And how would I explain that to her? She was only 6 at the time. I told my daughter that we would talk about that in a few days when we were calm, and I would be able to explain it better. Meanwhile, I brought elements of reasoning by telling her stories before going to bed, before going to sleep, to build up her comprehension. Later on, she was able to comprehend in her level of understanding the situation we have had. As you can observe, I used the same knowledge Fernando and I used in our workplace experiences. I create the time to serene the mind, my mind and my daughter's mind. I use the time I have created to select my thoughts. I chose to explain to my daughter why not keeping the stolen prizes was a more appropriate response. Also, knowing that my daughter wasn't able to understand the whole situation, I used the time I have created to break down the concept I want her to learn from that experiences into small pieces and brought them in stories so she could absorb them. So what is the fundamental knowledge to take control of your mind? What can you take home from this talk today? We highlight a few points. Number one, constantly observe your mind and check in how you are feeling. If your mind and your emotions aren't serene, don't make decisions or try to find solutions. Number two, create a time to serene the mind and the emotions. Number three, use the time you have created to select your thoughts. Choose the ones that are linked to your values and to your best feelings. Those will be your mental defenses against the adverse situations. Number four, most of the problems and obstacles are created by our own mind and how we perceive things around us. Work to build good and useful thoughts. They will help you in several situations to come. Number five, practice. Practice and practice every day in every opportunity. So you have these tools handy when you need them the most. And the last point, but not least important, logosophy works. And it works because it has a method. If you apply the method, I guarantee you, you will have the same results or even better results. If you don't, come and talk to me, all right? Thank you so much, everyone. Now I will pass you over to Maria to take it from here. Bye now.
Thank you so, so much, Renata and Fernando, for all the great insights. I could relate to so many aspects that you brought. I'm anxious. I want things my way. I can't always control how I react to people criticizing my work. So many common struggles you both raised. I love the internal check and adjust. That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all the valuable experiences. I hope this was beneficial to not only me, but to each of you, and that it made you think. And I hope it could have added something to everyone here. If you have any questions, you can leave them down below in the comments and we will answer all of them later. This was the first talk of our 4-talk series. And the next one will be on May 15th, the next Saturday, on the topic of the power to face changes successfully. Our invited speakers will present their experiences on topics like adapting to changes and balance. Very important topic as well. And before we go, we also routinely offer information courses on logosophy and how to apply its method. The courses consist on one-to-one sessions for 1 hour a week with one of our volunteers whenever it's convenient for you. It is free, and if you're interested, can you please fill out the form that we send in the link on the chat. You can also visit our website, logosophy.org, brand new website now, where you can download many books for free and learn more about the method and the institution. That's all we have for today. Thank you so, so much, Renata and Fernando, and all of you who joined in today for your participation. And we hope to see you again next Saturday. Bye.